Checking in with Mary Alice Williams of NJTV News, up next on Carpe Diem. Hello and welcome to Carpe Diem. I'm Merrill Brown, Director of the School of Communication and Media at Montclair State University. Joining me today is a highly acclaimed broadcast journalist and anchor for NJTV News, Mary Alice Williams. With an impressive career in investigative journalism on topics like health, ethics, and foreign policy, Mary Alice has established herself as a major voice in the business, from playing an integral role in the launching of CNN, the first worldwide television news network, to covering special reports for people like NBC and PBS, and most recently joining the NJTV News team just this past July. Thank you, Mary Alice, for joining us today.
I am so happy to be here.
Tell us about your new work at NJTV, how it's going, and what the strategy for the program is as we move into the fall of 2014.
During the Continental Congress in 1778, Benjamin Franklin said, you know, New Jersey is going to be a mere apostrophe between New York and Philadelphia. And it has been. From the media perspective, it has been. South Jersey people think they belong to Philadelphia, and North Jersey people think we're all New Yorkers. And no one has really tackled issues that are unique to this state. That's what NJTV News is trying to do. So we're not covering, it's not the local news everyone's become accustomed to. We don't cover murders and fires. Journalism is, in the end, the goal of journalism is to help people decide what to wear, what to do about their children's health, where to educate their children, who to vote for. And that's what we're trying to do with NJTV News. So we don't cover incidents. We cover the issues surrounding those incidents. And I hope it is really smart and engaging and helpful to people.
And I gather the audience is growing, which is important from both an impact point of view and also from a business point of view.
It is. It's terrific. I understand that the ratings are way up over the same time last year, and that's always good, although ratings, you know, we all have to live and die by the ratings, and that's the unpleasant aspect of our world. But they're doing well because we have a team of really smart young journalists of all stripes and with all different kinds of talents who've come together and are working as a team to put this together. They're just great. And
you, obviously, with your experience as an investigative journalist, have a point of view on what stories really matter in New Jersey in 2014. What's your lineup of priorities? What do you think is really important right now?
In no particular order, every day we try to cover the big five, we call them. It's the economy, education, the environment, arts. Am I going to do a Rick Perry and forget one? Oops.
Right.
And health. There you go. And everything sort of fits through that template if you think about it. Those are the big five areas that people care about and that really shape who we are as a people.
And if there's a message the show wants to have and that your editorial efforts have, is it about civic engagement? Is it about taking advantage of community opportunities? What's the point of view in approaching those stories?
What we try to do is show models that work in one place, for instance, Camden with the new community policing engagement, which cut crime there by half. Amazing. We take a model that works and illustrate that it can also work in Jersey City and in Trenton and in Newark. We are trying to help people share information about what works. So we're not, I guess the philosophy, and it's been my philosophy in journalism all my life, is our job is not to show what's wrong. Our job is to show what's possible. And that's what we do.
And that's encouraging. And that has been a theme, I guess, throughout your career. You showed people what was possible with 24-hour cable news.
Yes, we did.
Oh, let's talk about that a little bit. You are a builder of things,
As you are.
much like we're trying to build a new and exciting school here at Montclair State.
Right.
But you helped build CNN. You had a major management role in it. You helped introduce CNN actually to the World Trade Center, as I recall, the original location.
Right.
Tell us about the learnings from those years and what we should take from that period in CNN.
I believed when I was 8 years old, story we probably don't have time for here, but that if the whole world is watching, people are safer. Okay, so I'm doing the dishes. I'm 8 years old. It was my turn, and I saw on PBS the Adolf Eichmann trial. We weren't taught about the Holocaust then. You know, our parents wanted to protect us because we were little from that sort of thing. And I was horrified, and I ran to my father and said, "Why didn't you stop it?" He said, "We didn't know." I said, "But if you had known." He said, "We would have stopped it." I said, "So if people know that bad things are going on, they can stop it." And he said, "If you believe that, then you have to be a journalist." And 8 years later, I was.
And at CNN in the early years, it was really straightforward journalism, very much unlike what cable news has become today, which is way more complex.
Cable news is not complex. Cable news now is the talk fest. It is speculation and gab that is a stand-in for storytelling. I'm sorry to sound harsh about that, but our job is to tell stories. In the early days of CNN, the first decade, we were telling stories about what was going on in all over the world, so that the whole world could actually understand that we were in this together, that we were somehow connected. I mean, one of my favorite examples is a story I did on the fact that 5 million children under the age of that 1 million children under the age of 5 die every year in Africa from diseases that are entirely preventable because their moms can't get them to the little hospitals in the villages because they don't have wheels. So there's a woman, a motorcycle racer in the United Kingdom, where they race motorcycles apparently, who delivered wheels, lorries and trucks and wagons and motorcycles to Africa to get kids to the doctor for inoculations. That wasn't just what was wrong, that was an abomination, but we showed what was possible, what one person could do, and suddenly the whole world was in on that one. Doctors Without Borders were down there. There was the Mosquito Net organization. People actually do take action when they see it's possible for one person to make a difference.
And some of that work continues on CNN and on cable networks in general. Much of it, as you pointed out before, is about opinion and talk and chatter and so forth.
And this doesn't help people decide. It
well,
doesn't.
I guess proponents of it would say it gives people fresh points of view and multiple points of view. You apparently don't agree.
I don't agree because it, for instance, Fox, which calls itself a news channel and I contend is not, only gives one point of view. So for a viewer, and that's heavily watched, did you know? So for a viewer to switch the channel and see any other point of view or see, heaven forfend, somebody cutting it down the middle like they do on the PBS NewsHour and on Scott Pelley on CBS News, for instance, is where it's not opinion, it's more helpful to people.
So just to focus on CNN for a minute, because CNN is very much in the news even today about new programming initiatives. Right. If you were running the show there, and lots of people speculate about that, boy, if only I could run CNN. If you could run CNN today, what would you do differently? Would you return to its roots that you helped establish?
Well, I certainly would. I think, part of the problem was that it was sold to Time Warner, who squashed it like a bug. And part of it is that you can't say that it costs more money to cover stories now than it did, because back then it was bricks and mortar, and the little satellite trucks that we had to use were gigantic trucks and 700-pound cameras. I'm not kidding. And now we all have them in our pockets, some of them bent, I understand.
So they say. Mm-hmm.
So we don't, so it actually is much cheaper to use the technology available today to cover stories. What we don't have, it seems to me, is a commitment to actually tell those stories, let other people tell those stories. There are certain programs at CNN which I know for a fact are not allowed to shoot their own original video.
Hard to believe, but
Yes.
apparently true. So again, if we waved a magic wand and we put you in charge, would you go back to its roots and want to go back to straightforward
I
storytelling?
really would. The most successful aspect of CNN today is CNNI, the international division. Christiane Amanpour, the most wonderful person and journalist ever, is on that team. And the international team does straight stories and does that whole sharing of stories between Africa and Europe and Asia and even America that we used to do at the beginning. The original CNN became CNN International.
You've also been in and out of local news in a variety of capacities. You were WNBC, you're with CBS locally as well. You've done a lot of different things in local news, and yet you have this fresh perch on local news, even as local news in some ways deteriorates in the same way cable news has. What's the opportunity in local news now, especially as broadcasters and the independent stations kind of run away from it?
It doesn't take a lot of intelligence to spend money. It takes a change in philosophy to engage an audience, to find them where they are. There's so many ways in which people can get the news. By the time we deliver our newscasts, they're already making dinner or stuck on the subway or whatever.
Or have seen headlines on their phone.
Right, so they know what happened. They know about the employment rate, where Ebola is, and where the enterovirus D68 is today. By the time we get their attention. So we have to do something bigger to help them decide. We have to put that incident in the context of an issue.
Do you think local news is doing that today outside NJTV?
No, they're
What's
not.
wrong with local news?
What's wrong with the local news is we've just recently had this, yet again, a ghastly reminder of the problems of head concussions in football with a child who was killed on the field in Long Island, but that also happened with a classmate of my twins here in Montclair. Heartbreaking. We know about this. So why aren't we doing more? We've done a lot of stories about the dangers of concussion and the new equipment, and even moves toward stopping, sort of eradicating football. Parents are moving their kids out of football. We've known about this for a long time. Why aren't we doing something about it? My father was a team doctor for the Minnesota Vikings. He died very young. This was many years ago. And his pallbearers were the famous purple people eaters, the front four, linemen, Carl Eller and those guys. And they were all on walkers and in wheelchairs. And these were young men. They were in their 50s, maybe.
And local news can be doing a better job with this and other real human stories.
Right.
And they should be, and that's
right.
your
Our
point.
job is to shine a spotlight, isn't it, on what's going on in the world, to give people ideas, to engage them, to help them, as I said, decide.
In the 1980s, and when you were most visible at CNN, you were vice president of news there.
Yes.
And much was said about that opportunity for you as a woman at a time when few women were ascending to jobs like that.
Yeah, women pretty much weren't allowed.
Well, are things significantly better now?
I think they are. They're a lot better. I mean, I've been in this since just after the Peloponnesian War, so it's been a long time. But when I was 16, I wanted to be a producer. I was still in high school, and they said, the local station in Minnesota said, you have to go on the air now because by the time you're 25, women will never have any authority. Your voices will never carry any authority. So you got to go on the air now because by the time you're 25, you're done. And then when I turned 25, they said, by the time you're 30, you're done. Well, by then I was already at CNN. And they said, by the time you're 40. Now we don't have age limits at all on women. That's a huge change. We also know that women do have authority. We
always knew that as citizens.
We didn't know that. I mean, how many of you watch Mad Men?
Right.
We didn't know that women had authority. If they needed to wield power, they had to do it surreptitiously.
In 1983, you were interviewed by People magazine. We have the article right here, and you said then, on camera, a double standard still exists, or at least that existed in 1983. When men age, they gain authority. Women just get wrinkles. I hope the day comes when we will stop focusing on people's plumbing. This is 30 years ago now. Have people stopped focusing on women's plumbing or on plumbing?
I don't know is the short answer. I think it's better than it was. I think that men as they age do become more distinguished and have more authority, and they're a lot cuter now than they were when they were young, I can say. But women, I think the ones who've done this, you know, with their faces, that's always a problem. They don't age well. But I think it's better.
There is a president of a news division now who is a woman
Yes.
at NBC News.
Deb Turness, right?
That's exciting
Yep.
on many levels. That may not have been conceivable when you said this back in 1983. It is today, and such things are more commonplace.
Right.
You're encouraged about the gender
really
situation
am.
in television.
I think the only gender distinction that still exists, and it's human nature, is that you guys always look handsome with your suit jackets and your shirts and ties. Women, is she wearing that pink dress again? We all do that. Don't we all do that? We all do that. That's the only double standard left. But I think that there have been women in power positions in television news for long enough now where gender distinctions don't make a difference.
Let's come back to PBS. One of the exciting things about NJTV is a commitment to local news that generally doesn't exist throughout the public television system. NJTV being very special in that regard.
It is. It throughout the public system, and this was established by the Communications Act of 1934, that every state would have a public outlet. But most of them are C-SPAN-esque in that they run live feeds of whatever's going on in the state legislature, and that's about it. You know, maybe a community board meeting or school board meeting. We're actually doing a news program put together by journalists.
And wouldn't it be wonderful if it became a template for other things public television could be doing around the country?
Absolutely.
WNET here does some local news. They'd like to do more. You're a part of WNET
Yes,
as an affiliate, a subsidiary.
Right.
But throughout the system, there's a lot more that can be done.
Absolutely. There are maybe 5 rock star, and you can name them, rock star public television stations. WNET, of course, in New York is one. GBH up in Boston. I'm going to lose call letters TTW in Washington. Los Angeles has a pretty active one, and that's about it.
It's an opportunity, right, though?
Sure.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if philanthropy and funders of public television would realize there's a hole in local television today, increasingly called news, and public broadcasting ought to help fill that?
Right.
Agree?
You know, we hear all the time from people who have an axe to grind that everyone with a camera is a journalist. Well, any hack with an axe to grind and a camera can't be a journalist, which is why schools like Montclair State's are so important. That why we need to train battalions of ethical, honest, responsible journalists.
And you've been involved in that. Tell us a little bit about your history as a member of the higher education fraternity.
I'm a tenured professor. I started the broadcast program up at for the State University of New York at Purchase College, which is just a blast. Where I've been for 8 years. I'm on leave now because this show is really intense and takes all my time. The job I'm doing now, not including the anchoring, there were 3 of us at CBS News who did this. So it's a lot, but so I can't teach at the same time. But it's wonderful, and just working with the young people has, and now I sound like an old lady, with the young people in my day. Working with students has been great. I'm so heartened by the fact that these kids are smart and goal-goated and really want to know how to do this right, because they also believe, as we do, in the importance of sharing information like this.
And will you go back to higher education at some point? Is it in your soul now?
It is, of course, but also, and sure, I'll go back. But right now, I feel like I'm doing teaching every day because I've got a couple wizened experts. I count myself among the grandmothers of that set, and then a bunch of young people who are fresh out of college and learning. So there's a lot of teaching going on all the time.
What would you like how would you like the public to approach tuning into NJTV every night? What should they think about their expectations about it, and what could it mean in their daily news cycle?
That's such a big question.
There's a lot of choices on the dial. We want them to find NJTV.
Right. I want them to expect smart, period, local, period, news in capital letters. Smart local news. I want them to see that that a school board or a police department or a fire department or even a legislative bill that's affecting one place, a pipeline coming through the Delaware Valley, can affect people in other places in this state. I want them to understand that we are a connected whole. The South and the North of New Jersey are a connected whole, and that we have a stake in each other. I think that's what ultimately television news does. I mean, of course, the headline is it helps people decide whatever, but it also gives us a stake in each other's success.
And people will watch our conversation not just in New Jersey on public television, where the show is distributed, but also around the country on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And they might want to know what's going on with the governor of the state of New Jersey, who you folks cover aggressively and routinely.
Yep.
What are the expectations that you all have about his political future?
You know, it is so hard to know. I mean, I've been covering politics since I was sitting next to Mr. Humphrey the moment he became vice president.
That would be Senator Hubert Humphrey.
Yes, my godfather was Gene McCarthy, who ran for president. So
your politics are independent, of course, though.
Actually, completely. I mean, totally, because I'm like the rest of the world. I just grew up in Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor. That was what my parents were, so there you have it. But I'm like the rest of the world. I'm a fiscal conservative and a social liberal. You know, 85% of Americans define themselves that way.
So back to Governor Christie. What should our expectations be?
Both he and Hillary Rodham Clinton were front runners so early on that I keep reminding myself and the staff that in February of 1992, up in Manchester, New Hampshire, the night before the big New Hampshire primary, the first primary, we were in a restaurant, a big tall guy walks into the front, walks all the way to the back of the room, and not a single head turned. It was Bill Clinton. And that was, 8 months before he would be elected president. Anything can happen. I think Christie's obviously a rock star in the party. He's certainly, he spent 30% of his time so far of this term on the road for the Republican Governors Association, spending time not in the 9 states where Republican governors are in trouble, but in states that will be helpful to a presidential campaign. Jeb Bush is now coming in. They've got some big people coming in, and anything can happen between now and a year from now.
And are you all betting that there'll be a Christie run for the presidency, or will New Jersey affairs get in the way?
I think New Jersey affairs are part of the run for the presidency.
Okay, but what's the take as of fall in 2014 about the situation he's in vis-a-vis the bridge and so on and so forth? Is it going away, or is it complete?
If I knew that the U.S. Attorney's investigation was over, I would say it's behind him. But the U.S. Attorney made a point just last week of saying it's not over. So again, anything can happen. Are we waiting for that shoe to drop? I imagine. If nothing drops, then it is behind him and he can go on. But remember that Governor Christie is viewed in the rest of the country in a different way than he's viewed in this state. We know him better here. We see him all the time here, where they don't.
And is the conventional wisdom among the people who cover him that he's effective and a reasonable candidate for president, or that he's something else that probably shouldn't be in the presidential hunt?
Neither. We cover him as events require it. We covered him yesterday on his trip to Arizona. But I don't really have an opinion beyond the fact that anything can happen. Were I a betting woman, I would say, is he going to be in the top 5 going into the primary? Absolutely.
So his national appeal is intact, and
Yeah.
New Jersey affairs will play out as they will.
As far as I can see, his national appeal is intact, and he is very appealing to many Republicans in the country.
And where does he fit in the political spectrum of a party that seems fairly much committed to leaning right?
You know, the primary system, as it's grown up in the last 30 years, has become extreme on both ends, the right and left. If the Republicans were committed to it, I think they could move the party more to the center. If you look at Governor Christie's politics, it is more center than right in many, many respects. Liberals have agreed with him on seismic testing offshore and on many other issues that he's taken. So I don't know. It really is up to the party. If the Tea people are still at it and still dominating, and I rather suspect they won't be, then I don't think that he's under the scrutiny that he is on our staff. He might not be far enough right for them.
Fair enough. In just a few seconds we have left, how do you encourage young people to think about careers in media in a world where everything is changing so rapidly and seemingly so perilous?
Journalism is not dead. There is nothing more compelling than the human need to hear our own stories, to share our own stories. That's what journalism is. Learn how to be great storytellers, and you will work and never feel like you've worked a day in your life.
Well said. Thank you, Mary Alice. Thanks for spending time with us.
Happy to.
If you'd like more information about NJTV or Carpe Diem, you can write to us at the email address on your screen. That's carpediem@mail.montclair.edu, or call us at 973-655-5158. For Carpe Diem, I'm Merrill Brown. Thanks for watching.